أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فلما جهزهم بجهازهم جعل السقاية في رحل أخيه ثم أذن مؤذن أيتها العير إنكم لسارقون. قالوا وأقبلوا عليهم ماذا تفقدون؟ قالوا نفقد صواع الملك ولمن جاء به حمل بعير وأنا به زعيم. قالوا تالله لقد علمتم ما جئنا لنفسد في الأرض وما كنا سارقين. قالوا فما جزاؤه إن كنتم كاذبين؟ قالوا جزاؤه من وجد في رحله فهو جزاؤه كذلك نجزي الظالمين. فبدأ بأوعيتهم قبل وعاء أخيه ثم استخرجها من وعاء أخيه كذلك كدنا ليوسف ما كان ليأخذ أخاه في دين الملك إلا أن يشاء الله نرفع درجات من نشاء وفوق كل ذي علم عليم. قالوا إن يسرق فقد سرق أخ له من قبل فأسرها يوسف في نفسه ولم يبدها لهم. قال أنتم شر مكانا والله أعلم بما تصفون. Sadaqallahu al-Azim. My dear respected brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to another weekly Surah Halaqah, weekly Tafsir Halaqah, wherein we are discussing the Tafsir of Surah Yusuf, and we have reached ayah number 70. And preceding this ayah, we find that in last week's Halaqah we discussed the incident where the brothers of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam entered into Egypt in the way that was advised by their father. And once they had followed their advice in order to protect themselves, and they entered upon Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam, when he got an opportunity, Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam took his brother Binyamin to the side, and he explained to him that Ana Yusuf, that I am your brother Yusuf. And we also went over and we covered that how was this practice carried out, that Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam devised that rooms should be prepared for them. And for each room, there was a space that was allotted for 2 brothers. And in this way, there were 10 brothers, so they got to room with each other. And Binyamin, being the odd one out, Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam said that he will bunk with me, he will basically stay with me. And in the privacy of their room, this is when Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam reveals to Binyamin that I am your brother, and do not worry about the evil that you have experienced from the actions and the words of your stepbrothers. I have you covered, I will protect you. So ulama and scholars, they mention that when Binyamin found out that Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam was his brother, and he basically had revealed his identity to him, Binyamin begged his brother Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam to allow him to stay with him and not to send him back with his stepbrothers who would mistreat him, who would cause him harm, and who would bully him basically. So Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam, as scholars mention, as the ulama of tafsir mention, that his first protest was that if I keep you back, I know this is something that will cause a shock to our father Yaqub alayhi salam. And secondly, how am I to keep you back? How can I legitimately keep you back unless I accuse you of theft? Because Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam knew that the penalty for theft in the Sharia of Yaqub alayhi salam was that the person who steals becomes the slave of the person he stole from. So this was a known fact to them, and this was the only way that Yusuf alayhi salam could go through with the plan to keep Binyamin back. So we see this now playing out. فلما جهزهم بجهازهم جعل السقاية في رحل أخيه ثم أذن مؤذن أيتها العير إنكم لسارقون. And when their provisions were being packed, right, these brothers had come to get the food grains in Egypt, and obviously the allotted share was given to each one of them, that each person would receive a camel load, and their loads were particularly packed in a certain way. Their names were written on them, and it was made to be very, very specific. In the midst of all of this, Yusuf alayhi salam had the siqaya, the royal bowl. He had it placed in the camel pack of his brother, of Binyamin. And over here we find that the word siqaya that is being used for this bowl. In the following verses, we find that there is another terminology that is used, or term that is used for this particular bowl, and that is suwa' al-malik, the bowl of the king, or however you translate that. So the reality is that siqaya means or refers to a bowl that is used to drink water from. And suwa' also has a similar meaning. It is a utensil from which a person drinks from. So this is where the sense of the bowl being a cup, the meaning comes out from that. As for the attribution to the king, suwa' al-malik, the bowl of the king, this shows that this wasn't just a normal bowl, but rather it had significance because it was connected to the king of Egypt. And not only was this a normal bowl, it was actually a bowl that was made out of precious stone. Some ulama and scholars say that it was either made out of gold or silver, or some others say that it was made out of a precious stone like an emerald. However, not only was it priceless or very expensive on its own, but because it had this attribute back to the king, this made it even more valuable. Whether the king of Egypt, whether Yusuf alayhi salam used this bowl himself, or whether this was the official measure of grains, this bowl was used to stipulate the official measure of grains. This is another discussion altogether. So what he has done is basically he has this bowl put into the luggage of Binyamin, following through with the planning that they had done in secret for Binyamin to stay behind. So what happens is that once everyone's packs are loaded, the caravan is ready to head out. After a short while, ثم أذن مؤذن أيتها العير إنكم لسارقون. Right? An announcer calls out that, oh, people of this caravan, you people are thieves. Right? He calls out and he announces and he shouts out. He makes a scene. So this is something that we see that it doesn't happen right away, right? Because this was another way for Yusuf alayhi salam to make sure that this plan worked. That if this bowl had been placed into the pack of Binyamin, and right away, before they even left, it was discovered, then the brothers would basically sense some sort of foul play. Rather, Yusuf alayhi salam let them depart, and after a little while, that is when they were basically accosted by this announcer that, hey, we have lost the bowl, the official measure and the royal bowl of the king, and we believe you to be in possession of it. And this is where uh, they are then accused of stealing. So in the next ayah, we see that the brothers of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam, they turn around and they inquire, in protest, that how is it possible that we are being accused of stealing? ماذا تفقدون? What have you lost? Before accusing us of stealing, before accusing us of being thieves, what have you lost? Perhaps you have misplaced it. So the person said, قالوا نفقد صواع الملك ولمن جاء به حمل بعير وأنا به زعيم. So the person said that we are missing the measuring bowl of the king, and whosoever brings it back, they will have the reward of a camel's share of grain. And the person says that I am standing as a guarantee for that, meaning I guarantee the reward that is being promised here. This is something that will most definitely be given to the person who can bring back that precious cup that we are missing. So as I mentioned before, Suwa al-Malik is mentioned over here. So this is what the connotation is. So they then responded to this claim by saying that قالوا تالله لقد علمتم ما جئنا لنفسد في الأرض وما كنا سارقين. That right? We are known to the high officials of the city. We're not just strangers. We're not just people that are coming for the first time. We are known to the officials of this country. We are known to the officials of Egypt. We are known to the high society people, and we haven't come here to cause any sort of chaos, and we haven't come here to do any sort of mischief in the land, nor are we thieves, right? We are not thieves. We're being accused of stealing, but we are not thieves. So they basically presented their own case. And before we now move forward, subhanallah, there's two questions that arise over here. Is first and foremost, how is it possible that Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam, knowing how much of grief keeping Binyamin back would cause their father Yaqub alayhi salam, how did he willingly go through with this, right? How is it possible that he would add to the grief and the sadness of his father? Number two is a more serious question, that being a prophet of Allah, how is it possible that he would conspire and plot against his brother, have this bowl placed into their luggage, and then have them accused of stealing? How is it possible that Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam would go through with this? So there are several answers that have been given, but most of them do not make sense. One answer is that by Yusuf alayhi salam by Yusuf alayhi salam accusing his brothers of theft, of stealing, he is metaphorically referring to the fact that they stole him from their father Yaqub alayhi salam, and then sold him into slavery. So other scholars of tafsir, they say that this is a very long and drawn out explanation. The other explanation that some people say that the person who was announcing, he was not aware of the plot where the cup was hidden in the luggage. He was not aware of the conspiracy, and that is why he was justified in accusing the brothers of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam with stealing. But this is also something that does not make sense, because we know that it was a very well coordinated setup between Yusuf alayhi salam and his workers. The system that they had for implementing things, the system that they had for dealing with the people, they did it on a daily basis with perhaps thousands of people. So it was not possible, it doesn't seem likely that the person accusing them of stealing, which is a grave sin, would not know of this plan. So the correct answer here is what is given by Imam Qurtubi and in the Tafsir of Mazhari, where the answer that is given is the way that Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam carried out these actions. First and foremost, to keep his brother back, Binyamin, and secondly, to have his brothers accused of stealing in this way. This was infinitely due to the plans of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the infinite wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded Yusuf alayhi salam to do this, to carry out these actions, and the indication of that is found, in the part of the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كَذَلِكَ كِدْنَا لِيُوسُف. And this is the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, this is the way that we planned for Yusuf to detain his brother. Meaning that this particular way of having them accused of stealing, and this is something that is coming directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is having his plan carried out in this way, it doesn't conflict with the Sharia, with the commands of the Sharia, because obviously Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the lawgiver himself. If he, due to some sort of special circumstances, if he chooses to have something else done which apparently contradicts the laws of the Sharia, this is something that is allowed. And we find examples of this in the story of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr, right? That when they were traveling, right, and in the first instance where they had been given free passage upon the ship, upon the boat, by the ferryman, and Khidr went and he made a hole in that ferry. And Musa alayhi salam, because he did not understand or know of the special circumstances that were behind this action of Khidr alayhi salam, he condemned him. And he said that, why have you done this? You've damaged a brand new boat. You have basically repaid the favor that these people have done us by giving us free passage. You have repaid them with evil by destroying their property. And also in the second instance, we find that Khidr alayhi salam goes and he slaughters a child. And again, Musa alayhi salam condemns him without being aware of the special circumstances that was surrounding this action of Khidr alayhi salam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sometimes in his creation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has certain things happen because there is an underlying wisdom behind it. And this is why the actions of Yusuf alayhi salam took place the way that they did, because this was actually part and parcel of the trial for Yaqub alayhi salam. I've been mentioning the trial of Yaqub alayhi salam, in the past halaqahs, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose to test him because of his extreme connection and love and devotion that he had with Yusuf alayhi salam, because he was so attached to Yusuf alayhi salam, rather than, and this was something that was not appropriate for a prophet of Allah, and that they should be beholden to a person from the creation rather than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala themselves. Not to say that obviously Yaqub alayhi salam was not, obviously he was a prophet of Allah, he was completely devoted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but having something as strong of an attachment such as his love for Yusuf alayhi salam, this was something that would physically affect him, that would mentally affect him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to make that as a source of a trial for him. So this is the answer in which we find that the actions of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam in this case, they are justified because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself has ordered this. So as I said, قَالُوا تَاللَّهِ in verse number 73, قَالُوا تَاللَّهِ لَقَدْ عَلِمْتُم مَا جِئْنَا لِنُفْسِدَ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَمَا كُنَّا سَارِقِينَ. That when the royal announcers, they accused the brothers of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam of theft, they said that the responsible people of this country, they know us, right? They know that we aren't mischief makers. They know that we are not thieves. Right? How is it possible that we're being accused of this? So the person in the next verse, he answers and he says that, okay, if that's the case, قَالُوا فَمَا جَزَاؤُهُ إِن كُنتُمْ كَاذِبِينَ. What is the punishment if it is discovered that you're lying? You present a case and you say that your identity is known. However, what if we are right? What if that particular piece of property is discovered? What is the punishment then? And Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam is deliberately having them confess to the punishment because, again, according to Egyptian imperial law, the jaza, or the punishment for theft was not that the thief would become the slave of the person that he stole from, but rather, according to Egyptian imperial law at that time, was that they would suffer some sort of capital punishment, and afterwards they would have to pay back twice the amount of what they stole. Twice the amount of what they stole. So that was the punishment according to Egyptian imperial law. And even if this was carried out, uh, then it would not be legal for Yusuf alayhi salam to detain his brother Binyamin by the mandate of the Egyptian imperial law. And that is why he is having them fess up that their own version of the punishment for thievery. So they said what? That قالوا جزاؤه من وجد في رحله فهو جزاؤه كذلك نجزي الظالمين. They said that the punishment for the person in whose luggage the cup is found, then he himself will become the jaza. He himself will become the punishment, i.e., meaning that this person will then be allowed to be kept behind as a slave, right? As a source of punishment for him stealing. كذلك نجزي الظالمين. This is how we punish the wrongdoers, meaning that this was the punishment that was prescribed for stealing in the Sharia of Sayyidina Yaqub alayhi salam. So now that they have, given with their own words, they have basically pronounced the punishment. Then we see what happens next. فَبَدَأَ بِأَوْعِيَتِهِمْ قَبْلَ وِعَاءِ أَخِيهِ ثُمَّ اسْتَخْرَجَهَا مِنْ وِعَاءِ أَخِيهِ كَذَلِكَ كِدْنَا لِيُوسُفَ. So they began to search, right, the luggages. And what happened was, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is specifically stating that Yusuf alayhi salam, as a part of his elaborate plan, he had the luggages of all of his other brothers opened up before the luggage of Binyamin, right? Because if it was such that Binyamin's luggage was opened up first, then they could have again suspected some sort of foul play. So Binyamin's baggage was opened up last. And then the cup was found. ثُمَّ اسْتَخْرَجَهَا مِنْ وِعَاءِ أَخِيهِ. The cup was, or the bowl was taken out from the luggage of Binyamin. كَذَلِكَ كِدْنَا لِيُوسُفَ. Again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that this is how we planned for Yusuf alayhi salam. Right? It was not his plan, but rather it was the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. مَا كَانَ لِيَأْخُذَ أَخَاهُ فِي دِينِ الْمَلِكِ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ. That it was not, he had no right to take his brother, right? He had no right to take his brother as a slave in the law of the king, meaning that according to Egyptian imperial law, he was not going to be able to detain his brother except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had willed. And in this case, what was the will of Allah? That the brothers of Binyamin, the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam, would themselves present a punishment in which Binyamin could be kept back. So this was the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being enacted and manifested. نَرْفَعُ دَرَجَاتٍ مَّن نَشَاءُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we elevate in ranks whomsoever we will. Meaning that in this case, the daraja and the rank of Yusuf alayhi salam was elevated above and beyond that of his brothers, right? Yusuf alayhi salam was successful in the plan that he had enacted, and thus he was able to successfully keep back his brother. نَرْفَعُ دَرَجَاتٍ مَّن نَشَاءُ. And this elevation comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exclusively. وَفَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ. But at the same time, there's always the statement to remember that no matter how knowledgeable and how cunning and how intelligent a person may be, there's always going to be someone more knowledgeable, right? Even if the person is of knowledge, there's always going to be somebody who knows more than the person, right? This is a statement that we must always remind ourselves of this, that no matter who it is, no matter which stage we have reached in life, no matter how many PhDs we have completed, no matter how much of knowledge we have acquired, even if a person is a prophet, is a prophet of Allah, even then in front of the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is the knowledge that we have is nothing, right? The knowledge that we have is nothing compared to the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is something that would temper the arrogance. A lot of times when a person thinks that they have a lot of knowledge, it brings a level of arrogance with it. And when you compare and you remind yourself of the knowledge of Allah, this is something that should cause humbleness and humility to be enacted within oneself. So an example of the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala once again is found in the story of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr, when they were upon the boat and they were crossing on this body of water, whether it was the sea or the ocean. During that time, there was a tiny bird that came, and this bird basically dipped his beak into the water and took a tiny amount of water. So Khidr remarked to Musa alayhi salam that my knowledge and your knowledge, right, and the knowledge of the entire creation compared to the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like the amount of water that this bird has taken out of this body of water. Subhanallah. So again, وَفَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ, always to remind ourselves of the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the infinite master. He is the infinite possessor of knowledge, and through that wisdom, through that knowledge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does whatever He wills in His creation. So we find that once this event transpired and the cup was actually found in the brother in the luggage of Binyamin, the brothers had nothing left to say, because they themselves were so sure of the fact that they hadn't stolen, that they gave the punishment with their own words. And now that this bag, this bowl was found in the luggage of Binyamin, there was nothing else for them left to do. So they became very, very annoyed. And what did they say? We find this in the last ayah, that قالوا إن يسرق فقد سرق أخ له من قبل فأسرها يوسف في نفسه ولم يبدها لهم قال أنتم شر مكانا والله أعلم بما تصفون. They said that, with regards to Binyamin, that إن يسرق, if this one has stolen, then his brother has stolen before him, right? And from the way that they're addressing Binyamin, from the way that they're talking about Binyamin, it is as if they're not talking about their own brother, but rather somebody else. Yasriq, right? They didn't say that if our brother has stolen, but rather if this one has stolen, then his brother has stolen before him. Meaning that they, articulated in their own words that they did not consider Binyamin to be their full brother. They considered him to be their half brother, and they said that if he has stolen, then he has a full brother. He has a real, full brother before him who was also, who also stole. فَأَسَرَّهَا يُوسُفُ فِي نَفْسِهِ وَلَمْ يُبْدِهَا لَهُمْ. And Yusuf alayhi salam heard them speak these words, and although it caused him, it caused him discomfort to hear him being accused of stealing, he did not show his reaction. فَأَسَرَّهَا يُوسُفُ فِي نَفْسِهِ. He did not show his reaction to his brothers upon their accusations. وَلَمْ يُبْدِهَا لَهُمْ. He did not make it apparent. قَالَ أَنْتُمْ شَرٌّ مَكَانًا. And he said within himself, he said within his own heart and mind, that you are in an even worse position, because the reality of the matter here was that they knew that Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam had not stolen. They knew that he was completely acquitted of the charges that was made against him, but rather they still, falsely are, they're still like falsely accusing Yusuf alayhi salam of stealing. And out loud, what did he say? Wallahu a'lamu bima tasifun. Allah knows best of what you allege. Meaning these accusations that you are making. Allah knows the truth of these accusations that you are making against me to my face. Obviously, he did not disclose this because then he would have had to give up his identity. So it apparently seemed like he was agreeing, or he was making a comment on their observation of that if this one stole, then his brother before him stole. So what is this incident being referred to? We find that this is something that is mentioned by Muhammad ibn Ishaq and the scholar of Tafsir Mujahid. From them, Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, he mentions this incident, that Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam, when he was born, a short while thereafter, Binyamin, his brother, was born. And the birth of Binyamin was what caused the death of their mother. So as they were two young children, the paternal aunt of Yusuf alayhi salam, meaning Yaqub alayhi salam's sister, took in Yusuf. And even at that early age, Yusuf alayhi salam was a very, very beautiful child. He was very attractive, very outstanding. And this is one of the reasons that his puppy, right, his paternal aunt, she grew very, very attached to him, and she wouldn't let him out of her sight, and she would devote all of her time with him, and she would take care of him and things like that. And in a very similar manner to the way the attention was given by Yaqub alayhi salam. Yaqub alayhi salam would have actually kept Yusuf alayhi salam himself, but being that Yusuf alayhi salam was at a very young age, and he needed motherly care, or he needed a woman's care, in this case he allowed for his sister to take care of Yusuf. However, when Yusuf alayhi salam was a little bit older and he began to walk, this is when Yaqub alayhi salam told his sister that it is now time for Yusuf to return back to me. And at the same time, his aunt did not want to let go of him. She did not want him to go. So she also devised a plot. And what was this plot? This plot was that she had this waistband. That it was an antique waistband that she had inherited from Ishaq alayhi salam, from her grandfather. And it was something that was extremely precious to her. It was something very valuable to her and to also the family themselves. So what she did is that Yusuf alayhi salam, being a small child, a very young, ma'soom, innocent child at that time, he didn't know what was going on. So what she did is that she took this antique waistband and she tied it around his waist, and then she put the clothes of Yusuf alayhi salam over that waistband. And when Yusuf alayhi salam had gone and departed, this is when she started making a ruckus, saying that my antique waistband has been stolen. I can't find it. And once it was then discovered that Yusuf alayhi salam was wearing it underneath his clothes, according to the Sharia of Yaqub alayhi salam, Yusuf alayhi salam then became the jaza. He had to serve the punishment that he became the slave of his aunt. And this is the way that his aunt was able to get him back. And she kept him with her until she passed away. And then when she passed away, later on, then everyone discovered that Yusuf alayhi salam hadn't actually stolen, but rather it was the plot and the conspiracy from his aunt, because she was, she loved him so much and she wanted to, keep him. And this is the way that she did it. So the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam, they knew of this. They knew of the reality that although he was accused of stealing, he wasn't actually a thief. And this was a conspiracy that was leveled against him. And yet they still, in their moment of anger and bitterness, they would accuse Yusuf alayhi salam of stealing. And this is why he is saying and making the statement that antum sharru makana, you people are worse than what I thought, right? Not only did you take me away from my father, you sold me into slavery, you've gone out of your way to harm me, and now that I'm out of the picture for 40 years, your plotting and your hatred towards me hasn't stopped yet. You're still, hell bent. You're still, causing me harm. You're still accusing me of stealing. So he, said this within himself that antum sharrun makana, and wallahu a'lam bima tasifun. And he said, and this is his statement, that Allah alone knows best. That whether I stole or not, Allah knows the truth of the matter of what you're accusing me of, and He will deal with you in an appropriate way. So this is the ayah number 77, where we see that the incident occurs in such a way that Binyamin is now kept behind by Yusuf alayhi salam, and the brothers are now being forced to return back to Canaan without Binyamin, although they had given, promises to their father. They had pledged that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they had pledged that they would return Binyamin to their father to the best of their ability. So we will see, inshallah, in next week's halaqah, that when it was completely out of their hands, when it became completely apparent that Binyamin was the one that had basically taken this thing, and there was nothing that they could do, then they began to appeal to Yusuf alayhi salam that we have an elderly father. Can you please, give us a chance and return him back and keep one of us? And they started to negotiate with Yusuf alayhi salam, and then we see his response. And then once that response came through, then we see that then the brothers, they depart from there, and Binyamin is left behind. And Yehuda, the oldest amongst them, he remembers the promise that he made to his father, first in the case of Yusuf alayhi salam, that he would protect him, and secondly again in the case of Binyamin. And he says to himself that I can't do this anymore. There's no way that I'm going back and facing our father after making such promises to him that we would safeguard, two of his sons, and now two of his sons are missing. So we will, inshallah, explore all of these things in next week's halaqah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the tawfiq and the ability that we're able to practice and learn from the different moral lessons that are found in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, and we're able to imbibe them within our lives. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. I have, mashallah, two people from Singapore giving salam to us. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khairan for joining us. And also, Brother Ghulam, thank you also. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khairan for joining us from Plano, Texas. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and bless each and every person that is viewing, inshallah, and benefiting from this dars and halaqah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless each and every one of you and your families, and inshallah we will see you in next week's halaqah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.